Today, we're going to dive into a story from history that's a real head-scratcher. It's about a golden age that was, believe it or not, a total failure. We're talking about the puzzling reign of a king named Jeroboam II.
So let me just start by asking you this. What if a nation's absolute best of times were actually a sign that things were at their worst? It sounds completely backward, doesn't it? But that's the mystery we're going to try to solve today.
All right, so to really get what's going on, we have to travel back in time, back to a moment when the northern kingdom of Israel got this totally unexpected opportunity. This was the beginning of a golden age that honestly nobody saw coming.
Now, you gotta understand the politics of the time. For more than a century, this massive, terrifying empire, Assyria, had been on the move, just squeezing smaller kingdoms like Israel. But then, right around 800 BCE, for its own reasons, Assyria just stopped. All that pressure suddenly lifted, and this opened up this incredible 45-year window of peace. It was a moment for Israel to finally breathe.
And man, did they take advantage of it. Under their new king, Jeroboam II, Israel just exploded with success. We're talking peace, a booming economy, and they started winning back territory, lands they hadn't controlled since the legendary days of King Solomon. I mean, from the outside looking in, things had never, ever been better. But here's where the story takes a really sharp turn. Because when you look at how history actually remembers this king, you get a completely different and, frankly, a really puzzling verdict. I mean, think about it. The guy had a long, stable reign, 41 years on the throne. This wasn't just some flash in the pan. We're talking about a whole generation of peace and success. He was clearly a capable leader. So you'd expect pages and pages in the history books, right? Nope. His entire 41-year reign, the whole thing, is summed up in just 7 verses in the Book of Kings. 7! That's a massive red flag. It tells you right away that whoever wrote this history cared about something else entirely. And here's why. The official judgment on him is just brutal. It says he did evil in the eyes of the Lord. So by the one standard that mattered to the historian, the king's faithfulness to God, this entire golden age was led by a complete failure.
Which, of course, brings us to the central question of this whole thing. Why would God bless a nation that was being led by an evil king? If he was so bad, why all the peace and prosperity? Was this some kind of reward for a sinner?
Well, the text actually gives us the answer directly. It says that God saw the bitter suffering of the people and decided he didn't want to just wipe them out. So he used Jeroboam II as a tool to save them. The success wasn't a reward for the king, it was an act of mercy for the nation.
So this wasn't about them earning some kind of prize. The key idea here is something called grace. Think of it like this. This whole period of good fortune was an unearned opportunity. It was a final, generous chance for the entire nation to look around at how good they had it and use that moment to turn back to what really mattered. It wasn't a stamp of approval at all. It was a test.
So, did they pass the test? Well, to find that out, we've got to listen to a voice from the ground, a prophet named Amos. And he shows up with this blistering warning that just reveals how badly the nation was misreading its own success. And here's where you really see the disconnect. The people were all excited about something they called the Day of the Lord. In their minds, it was going to be this huge party, a day of reward. They were thinking, hey, look how great we're doing. God must really love us. But then Amos shows up and basically says, you have no idea what you're asking for. He warns them, for you that day will be darkness, not light. It's going to be like escaping a lion, only to get cornered by a bear. You run inside your house to safety, and then a snake bites you. There's just no escape. Amos makes it crystal clear that God was not impressed by all their religious shows. I mean, listen to this quote. It's stunning. I despise your religious festivals. Away with the noise of your songs. All their worship, all their rituals, they were totally empty because they had nothing to do with how they were actually living their lives. So what was actually happening under the surface? What was this dark side of prosperity that had Amos so fired up? Well, Amos basically breaks it down into 3 huge problems. First, everyone was just complacent. People felt so safe and secure, they just pushed any thought of disaster out of their minds. Second, their religion was fake. Yeah, they were going through all the motions, the festivals, the singing, but they were completely ignoring the call for real justice. And third, and this is a big one, a luxurious indifference. They were indulging in wealth while the nation was rotting from the inside out. Amos paints this incredibly vivid picture.
He calls out the rich and powerful for lying on their ivory beds, lounging on their fancy couches, eating the best food, drinking wine by the bowlful. They were absolutely living the high life, making music, enjoying themselves. But, and this is the line that just hits you, they were not grieving over the ruin of the nation. Their own comfort and wealth had made them totally blind and indifferent to the moral decay happening all around them.
And this all leads us to this really powerful and honestly timeless takeaway about the incredible danger of distraction. See, here's the thing. The real enemy for Israel wasn't Assyria. It wasn't hardship. It wasn't even the prosperity itself. The real enemy was distraction. The good times distracted them and made them forget what truly mattered: justice, the relationship with God, their responsibility to each other. And, bad times can do the same thing, making us focus only on our own fear. At the end of the day, they just lost sight of the big picture.
And that leaves us with a pretty tough question to chew on. It's really easy to look back thousands of years and judge these people, right? But what about us? In our own lives, in our own societies, when everything seems to be going really well, what might we be forgetting to see?